ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the undisputed heavyweight champion of the world show made for the fans by a fan. I'm your host, as always, Richard Tiemann. This is the ever-growing, always expanding, award-winning fan show. And I do want to thank those of you for tuning in. It is Wednesday. That means that it is our weekly Battlebots special. And tonight is no different. Hot outside, but we're turning up the heat inside as we finally round up our first judge guest. That's right. We've talked to everybody in the Battlebots landscape. The founder, Greg Munson. Okay? Referee, John Remar. The voice of Battlebot, the announcer, the master of ceremonies, Farouk. Last week, we even had one of the commentary team members, Kenny Florian, former UFC fighter, on. And then, of course, throughout the season, we've gotten to know so many builders, drivers, just team members of all the different bots you see out there. But we have never had a judge on the show, and that is one of the most crucial parts of Battlebots is the judges. Because why? Why, you ask? Why? Well, if it's not a knockout, if it's not a clear-cut victory, the fight goes to the judges, and there are 3 of them, so there are no draws in Battlebots. There will always be either a unanimous decision or a 2-1 split decision, as they call it. But this is one of the most overlooked parts of Battlebots next to the pit, and that's the judges. Derek Young, the bad boy of Battlebots, will be joining me. We had a fantastic conversation last night. He wasn't able to be on the show live, and he was a little bit upset that he couldn't make it on the live broadcast, but I said, hey, don't you worry. We'll get you recorded. We'll have a great conversation. It was a bit of a lengthy one, so we're going to have to start it early, meaning that we're going to have to sort of dive right in and slice through the headlines. So there's been some interesting developments with the headlines as far as what they are today. It's stuff that I don't normally talk about, but it is a slow news day, so might as well. And I feel like it's, 'tis the season, right, of rumors and scandal and anything that you can dredge up. This one, though, the top headline of the day, I do not believe is fabricated in any way or is rumor. Like, they are going to play this thing out, and we're going to see how the landscape of college football is changed. I don't have any word yet on the status of Sean Brackett or Mr. Espinoza just yet. I'm going to check in with them and see, maybe. But tomorrow night we will have Brian Klum of Klum Dog Outdoors on. Him and I are going to go fishing this weekend up at Priest Lake, looking to catch some Mackinaw. Always a fun fish. I haven't caught one since I was a kid. Like a little kid. Like, I have to look at pictures and be like, oh, I did catch one. Like, I can't remember it. So it's been that long ago, so we're going to make some new memories. And it's beautiful this time of year up there. Fantastic spot. And I used to practically spend my summers up at Priest Lake. And, as you get older, you have less and less time for other things, and you devote more and more time to certain things. Right now, for me, it's the show, work, and school. Probably in that order. No, it's the show, school, and then work. There we go. But anyway, enough about, the going-ons. Is that even a term? The ongoings? There we go. Ish. Of the fan show. Let's dive right into today's headlines. And the headlines are that Urban Meyer... Oh, Urban. Ohio State has placed their head coach on paid administrative leave. This, of course, in the wake of multiple reports that Urban Meyer is on paid leave pending an investigation into reports that he knew about the domestic abuse allegations against an ex-assistant. Now, of course, you rewind the clock, what? God, how long's it been now since the big Penn State Joe Paterno and Sandusky scandal, right? It was the it was the scandal that killed Joe Pa, man. I mean, this is the kind of stuff that it doesn't fall to white noise anymore. No. Like, this is at the forefront. This is career ending. Whether or not you are the party, if you were a party too. So if you knew about it, you might as well engrave your tombstone now. But this is Ohio State, the Ohio State. This is Urban Meyer we're talking about, brought that title home for Ohio State. And this is college. This is football. You know, who cares if it's college or NFL? They have a way to sort of abuse and manipulate the system. Let's not church it up. Okay, they got great legal teams and they know how to work around. Okay, but this is something. My prediction is that he's going to be on leave now. Okay, I feel like if he was going to be fired, he would have been fired. But that could still change. Okay, obviously the future is as early as tomorrow. Future is as early as like a second from now. I believe he will not be fired. If he was going to, it would have happened already because we are a very knee-jerk society. We want stuff. We want it now. All right. But I think this investigation, air quotes on that, will determine that he had no knowledge of it, despite multiple reports. You're talking about a figure like Urban Meyer versus multiple reports. That's not going to hold a whole lot of water. We'll see. A few comments on this. Ohio State is doing an investigation into the allegations, and Urban Meyer has been put on paid administrative leave. And let's see what else we have here. Ryan Day will serve as acting head coach for the football team during the investigation. And here's the statement from the Ohio State University. The university is conducting an investigation into these allegations. During the inquiry, Urban Meyer will be on paid administrative leave. Ryan Day will serve as acting head coach during the investigation. We are focused on supporting our players and on getting to the truth as expeditiously as possible. It's a very politician-like sort of thing there. It's like I said, they're going to work the system. They're going to do what they do. In NFL news, or I guess CFL news, if we want to look at that, Johnny Manziel's going to get his first start for the Montreal Alouettes. Last we talked about Montreal. Last we talked about the CFL. Was Jack Bramswig getting a contract there. And then, of course, former Green Bay Blizzard head coach Chris Williams being one of their regional scouts. So a lot of things happening for the Montreal Alouettes. Let's see what the headlines are for today in the NFL. Of course, the top headline for the NFL webpage is Ohio State and Urban Meyer. Of course it is. Patriots release wide receiver Matthews post-hamstring injury. Packers linebacker Ryan, torn ACL, will miss the 2018 season. That's too bad. Joe Thomas' successor, ? Browns shift Bitonio to left tackle. Colts guard Mewhort retires after 4 seasons. And then Seahawks sign veteran guard J.R. Sweezy. Niners use Sherman torching as a coaching point. Yes, it has been quite the week for the 49ers and the media. Having a field day with Mr. Sherman. And again, I need to reiterate my stance that I was very much not for the Sherman signing. But I don't think it's fair to put early judgment on him for frickin' training camp. Okay? Like, the guy might not even be 100% yet. So I'm not going to get on the defensive for Sherman. I'm just saying, like, you guys are so quick to judge. And you need to just, I'm not even going to say trust the process. I'm just going to say let it play out. And that's what you guys need to do. Because that's where we're at right now. Sherman got smoked, like to say the least, by Marquise Goodwin. But Marquise Goodwin does this to guys. Like, he's probably one of the fastest wide receivers in the league. And I think he's a very underappreciated fast wide receiver. But he's got some of the fastest feet in the NFL. And he just smoked Sherman straight up. Then they showed a video of Sherman and Pierre Garçon, who was wearing number 15, Crabtree's old number, on an end zone corner fade, and Sherman breaking it up. So was that Niners padding stats, if you will, doing a little bit of like let's do some good PR for Sherman? Probably, but it's training camp, folks. Pump the brakes. Focus on your fantasy football team. And I know that people are like, oh, I need to scout the training camp so I can draft right. I need to just calm down, okay? I realized the other day that we can't even use the saying like a kid at Toys R Us because there's not Toys R Us's anymore. Like 5 years from now, people aren't going to know what that means. They're not going to understand the reference. They're not going to be like Captain America, be like, I get it. I understood that reference. No, it's not going to happen. I give it 5 years before people don't understand what Toys R Us was. You're going to talk to a whole generation. They're just like a little kid at what? Toys R Us, what? Huh? Yeah, it's sad. I know. Friday, we got a brand new episode of Battlebots. It's Wednesday, so this is our Battlebots special. So enough of my ranting, rambling, and raving. Before I get to the interview, though, don't forget that Dynamite Enterprises is your place to go to customize your world screen printing, embroidery, hats, t-shirts, foam fingers, cup holders, koozies, t-shirts, probably jeans, polos, everything that you can think of that you could put a logo on, they'll do it. And Ethan's a great guy at doing that. And so hit up Ethan at dynamiteenterprises.com. And that is Ethan at dynamiteenterprises.com. So we'll be right back with Derek Young, the bad boy of Battlebots, from bot builder and competitor to the judges table, right after this. You're listening to The F.A.N. Show, your home for all things football and nonsense. My special guest tonight, Farouk. Farouk, welcome.
He's no expert, but here's the thing. Football and nonsense is what he brings. Sports talk with a twist. It's The F.A.N. Show.
Do you know him as Kevin from the League? It is none other than very funny Steve Ranazisi.
99% of the population doesn't know who I am, but the 1% do. They yell and scream inappropriate things at me in public.
Kyle Ray. Kyle, welcome.
And I was like, wow, I think we just saw the whole Super Bowl, Phyllis. It's like that scene in The Simpsons, like, why rent the movie? I just saw the best part.
Funny man Brad Williams.
Yeah, I'm here. No, I flew in just for your podcast. I've heard about this podcast. I've heard it's fantastic.
It's Mac and Farva, but they are my special guests tonight. Steve Lemmy, Kevin Heffernan.
I was in Mexico for 10 weeks in a Speedo. Like, that was me going to work. I was putting on a Speedo.
Farva is the most fun to play, and it was a blast to do that again, to do Farva again.
So then the makeup artist had to put Vaseline on your body, right?
Yeah.
And then put the powdered sugar on top of that. Is your name really Richard Siemens?
Listen live every Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday night on Spreaker.com, or subscribe to the podcast on iTunes and SoundCloud. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back, and with me, finally, one of the judges of BattleBots. It is the bad boy of BattleBots, Derek Young. Welcome to the program, Mr. Young. How you doing?
Quite well. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. First and foremost, why did they call you the bad boy of BattleBots?
It goes way back. I don't know how many of your listeners watched the original Comedy Central series, but my very first televised match was this walking robot I had, Pressure Drop, was fighting this a wedge robot. And basically what happened was in the 3 minutes of the match, my robot could barely move around, and his just died and emitted smoke. And because it was a walker, it was really slow. And so, his was sitting there not moving. And so I was walking over towards him, but it took so long. The time ran out before I could get to him. But I knew the audience was just, they hadn't seen anything happen, right? And I was like, we got to do something here. And so there was a late hit. My robot had a spring-loaded axe and punctured a hole in the top of this wedge robot after the bell. And that pretty much cemented it right there. Comedy Central having any problems applying, any sort of label to anyone, since it was sort of a jokey show on a joke network. And so they didn't call me the bad boy back then. It was most hated driver, which I thought was a little unfair, but it's true that it probably wasn't the nicest thing to do, but it was mostly for the audience. I was like, come on, they got to see something. And let's be honest, the fight wouldn't have made it to television if not for that. So the guy who was fighting Randy, he was very upset at the time, but, once we got those sweet royalty checks, I think he probably got over it.
Well, hopefully time heals all wounds, but I do love those moments in life and in the world of, media or sports where it's like one moment lives in infamy and can define a person's entire character, life, whatever. I mean, Ray Billings has played the character of the villain role so well, but it wasn't just from like kind of one moment. Like, he's always been kind of the maniacal laughter kind of guy. And then they've even tried to put Jameson Go of Sawblaze into that heel category because they pitted him up against who? Overhaul, to start out. So, but I love that there's these unexpected moments. One time, a one and done that changes the course of everything. And here you are, Derek Young, the bad boy of BattleBots, as a result of something that happened from a time that people some of the fans aren't even aware that there was a Comedy Central days of BattleBots. So I love it. Yeah. I love it.
It was interesting because I came back to, 13 years later, and they got the reboot, and I'm there, and the people working on the production, this is during the first season, were like, hey, so we heard you're sort of like, the bad guy. And I'm like, no. That was television. That was Comedy Central doing that. That's not me. And then I found myself and our team in our hotel room assembling a net into a box. And we're just doing this, and I just realized, I'm like, maybe I am that guy. We didn't do that. I knew it was going to make a lot of people upset. So, it depends on how you view it, whether I'm being subversive or I'm just kind of being a jerk about it. So I like to go on the more subversive side, at least for the net thing. It was supposed to be provocative and, just something no one had done before, and I wasn't supposed to be. The idea wasn't to be like, I'm skirting the rules to do this, but that it read pretty heavily that way on television.
Of course it did. They love their characters on TV as we all see portrayed, whether it's an actual fictional show or a reality series. We've got to have our characters, and you clearly are one. Now, you're a judge. We've got plenty of questions for you as a judge, especially coming off my last two weekly specials, Kenny Florian last week, and then we had Logan Davis from Sub-Zero the week before. Got into the discussion of judging because of one bout that had a finish that kind of surprised some people, which we'll get to in a moment. But I guess the big question is, you're one of a few that I've had on the show that were actually part of those original Comedy Central BattleBots days. Al Kindle, I believe, was one, and I forget who the other was. But why aren't you competing now? Why judging? So as soon as the Comedy Central show wrapped up, I did one local amateur competition down in Los Angeles called Steel Conflict with my Complete Control middleweight, which was an extremely expensive, well-developed,
I would say pro level robot. The thing people may not know about the Comedy Central days is every time you were on the show, you were paid royalties.
Oh, wow.
You were getting paid. So you didn't even have to win the matches. You just had to be on television to get paid. And I was on quite a few episodes, and I was very used to getting money back from this effort. And so what happened was I went to this amateur competition. I was like, okay, this will be fun. And basically, Christian Karlberg had a tombstone-type horizontal bar spinning middleweight that just tore up my last middleweight version of Complete Control. And, with no funding in sight, I was just like, you know what, I'm done with this. And I decided to focus my hobby, time, and energy on other things. I also was realizing that, especially after that match, that, the power that was being made available to the robots with spinning weapons was just, outpacing the type of machines that I was really interested in building. And so that was another, I was sort of like, I don't really want to build a spinning robot, or, at that point you could also build a brick wedge. And so I decided to hang it up, basically.
Oh, fair enough.
Yeah. And then, so the reboot happens, and I actually got a phone call from Greg Munson being like, hey, you should, we got a TV deal. I'm like, oh, that's awesome. Congratulations. He's like, you should consider building something. And I said, oh man, I don't know. Like, I'm old now. I have a kid. I don't have the time that I used to. I used to work, contract work in the film industry. And so I could kind of, do my own hours, but I was working at a pretty intense startup at this time when Greg got in touch with me, and I was like, sort of, on the fence. And, but, there's this thing where you get these ideas in your head that initially don't sound great, and they just start sort of picking away at you. And, I was thinking, like, well, maybe if I had a team, back in the Comedy Central days, I did everything solo. Maybe I could get some people I know to help me build this, and we could share the workload and, try and make it work that way. And so basically I talked myself into it, and then recruited a couple of guys from the startup I was working at, and a friend of mine who I knew from the original Comedy Central days, and we did it. And I actually asked Greg, I'm like, okay, just for context, at this time I was working at this startup called Mission Motors, which was, we're an electric vehicle technology company focusing on, our main sort of halo product was an electric superbike.
Mm-hmm.
So it was 100 kilowatt plus motors we're dealing with, insanely high energy and power density, lithium batteries that we had access to, and a lot of knowledge around that sort of stuff. So my response back to Greg was, do you want me to build the most powerful spinning robot Battlebots has ever seen, or would you like me to bring a large version of Complete Control? And he basically said the latter. And I was like, okay, I'm fine with that, because that's really what I want to build. Like, we had the technical capability to do something really insane on that end of the spinning robot, but I never, I've done a little, dabbled in that, but that's never really been my focus in BattleBots. So yeah, I went for the big Complete Control, and the first season, as everyone might remember, was didn't go great. The net incident was fun and memorable, but the rematch was really sad. Just we were not well prepared. And then the other thing I realized as soon as we showed up was, I had not been doing this for 13 years. And I was like, there's no way our robot's getting through this. Just looking at like the level of fortification around some of the other robots, and, obviously the weapon mass and energy being put into them. And I just knew there was like, it would take some incredibly lucky series of events that would have our robot be able to be, really competitive. So season 1 happened. We had a good time, and when it got picked up for season 2, we're like, okay, we don't have a ton of time to redo much. Let's just focus on making it a little bit more serviceable, bring more spares, be more prepared. But we know that, we still don't really have the machine that can win this thing. And we just basically hope for some good fight pairings. And the bombshell fight was basically the best I could have hoped for, to have like a really super convincing win.
Yeah.
Weapon doing what it's supposed to do, the flamethrower working, like everything was awesome. And that's all I ever wanted was like one solid, make the robot do the thing it was designed to do. And I actually had really high hopes going into the Warhead fight because I had seen the robot. It had been around for a really long time. I wasn't expecting too much out of their weapon. Paul Ventimiglia was like, oh, yeah, that thing didn't hit so hard last year. And, of course, they kept it under wraps, so they had doubled the power of it. And we were just, obliterated, as expected if we had to face a big spinner. That was what the net was for, too. That was like our contingency. Like, we knew that our robot was not well armored. It was very delicate, even going into season 1. And then, starting season 2, I just knew that it was fraud. And so, in the end, I accomplished all the goals I wanted, which was to win a fight in convincing fashion, having the robot do the thing. The loss was spectacular, which was great. That was exciting to take part in, even though it didn't go our way. That was, I think there was a recent list posted of sort of top 10 modern Battlebots fights, and both of our fights from season 2 were in that list. So, that's kind of all I could have hoped for. And by the time season 3 rolled around, there was just no, one, the timeline was way too short for me, and 2, at the end of season 2, I was just finishing buying a house, and my second child was, I think, like a month away. And so it was just like, no way, I cannot do this any longer. It's just too intense. Basically, it's like a second full-time job for the run-up. And that was with 3 months of lead time. For season 3, I think the competitors had 6 weeks. And I was just like, there's no chance that I can take part in this. So, so I hung it up. I pretty sure I announced it at the end of season 2 to the production staff that was it for me, that I was done. They didn't publicize it on the show for whatever reason. I guess it's not critical. And they probably don't want to say it and then have me say, oh, no, I didn't mean it, and come back season 3. Hung it up. And then, amazingly, I got the second phone call during season 3 that was, I think, only like 3 weeks before the competition. And when I saw Greg Munson's name come up on my phone, I was like, oh, man, they must be really desperate for robots. And I let it go to voicemail because I was doing something with my kids at the time. And then I heard the voicemail that F.A.N wasn't going to be able to make it. F.A.N Davis, who was judge for the sort of ex-competitor judge for season 1 and 2. And I was like, oh, yeah, I want to do this. And it was great. It was like pretty much, for me, the best possible outcome. Getting to be involved, getting to watch all the fights, and not having to do the heavy lifting.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like when a player switches to the commentary role. It's like, all the perks, all the excitement, but you don't have to worry about, your role in it is so much hands-on. You're just kind of sitting back, enjoying it as a fan. And, I got to say that this is, to me, it's a sport. And like with any sport, there seems to be sort of a formula that you see that will evolve, that will change, and so on and so forth. That's a winning formula. And BattleBots has that, I believe, in vertical and horizontal spinners, which, Zoe, when I talked to her back in the ABC days, she said that she's very against, conforming, I guess, so to speak, to the ways of everybody else, like the Tombstones or the end games and Minotaurs. But for you, being part of the one of the founding fathers of BattleBots, like, what's for you been the most exciting sort of evolution of this sport?
That's a little bit difficult question for me to answer, because I think where the sport's naturally going and what I'm most interested in seeing are divergent in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. I still appreciate the fights with like big energy spinning weapons. I think they're amazing and spectacular. but you know, you can look at the type of robots I like to build, and it's to me it's kind of sad that we haven't really figured out a way to make some sort of competitive parity there. So on the spinning robot tip, just like the level of preparation I found is super impressive. Like that's really what ends up winning fights, and people who know how to build things that are repairable, and this sort of nuanced stuff that maybe the viewers don't get to see. I think is I really like seeing that from the innovation side on the robots. The Minotaur guys, they kind of are sort of the pinnacle of a refined design. I don't know how. I think they've been building that same robot for 9 years, and just constant improvement on that one particular design. And so I think that from an engineering and technical perspective is quite interesting. I would love to see more lifting clamp bots personally, but that's just, the reality is people want to compete to win, and I get that. And so you show up with what is going to do that. So I don't know if that answered your question, but you can. That's where I find myself.
Hey, and I understand. I respect that. It is something that I think will sort of evolve more as it grows, and hopefully it does that on the Discovery Channel and Science Channel. It's been a great partnership and a great new season and format. Now, as a judge and as a former competitor yourself, do you feel like there's more pressure on you in calling fights? Like, do the other judges look to you as sort of maybe a tiebreaker as far as what your thoughts were on the fight? Like, what's that discussion like?
Yeah, this is something that they don't seem to get across very well on the show. Is we actually don't discuss any of our own personal opinions about the fight.
Oh, wow.
All discussion that's happening after the fight is purely objective. We'll be talking about what we saw, but not what we thought. And so if people think that there's some collusion happening, that's absolutely not happening, because we don't discuss what we're going to score or who we thought won. It's, we say, so-and-so's wheel came off. Oh, so-and-so's weapon seemed to be broken for about half the fight. We kept all the discussion to purely objective remarks, and then let each judge decide how they were going to score. I feel like my role as the ex-competitor helped put a lot of the stuff into context for the other judges, but I certainly wasn't trying to tell them, I wasn't trying to sway any decisions at any point.
Well, fair enough. Well, we all thought, at least from my perspective as a fan, audience member, and even when I was down there for the tapings, that there might have been like some discussion that went on just for the really close ones. And I know that, part of the reason that I was so excited to have you on was because there was a fight where the decision, it went to the judges, and the decision was one that I disagreed with. And even before, I heard Kenny Florian, who also disagreed with it. And we talked about it last week. I believe it was Ice Wave and Scorpios, where Kenny, a former MMA fighter who does a lot of that, covering one-on-one combat type sports, said that, even if you're the aggressor, if the other guy is doing all the damage, like, who really wins that? So I said, well, what about this idea? You have your former bot builder, like you, in there with the experience and the background of the sport. You have your sort of unbiased fan celebrity perspective, which you do. But why not the third one? If there's going to be three judges, you throw in somebody with kind of that combat, MMA, wrestling, whatever, one-on-one, even boxing background to maybe, have that perspective too. But I guess it doesn't really matter if you guys don't have discussions. But has that been talked about, like the changing up of the different judges for different episodes?
Well, I certainly don't have any input into who the other judges were. That was the first day I showed up. I knew that I was going to be there for the duration, but I was like, who else am I going to be here with? And that's when they told me.
Oh, okay.
And none of these people. Well, actually, that's not true. Simone Yurts is going to be joining at the end of the season. She is sitting in for, I believe, the quarter, semis, and finals. And she actually has an MMA background.
Oh, hey, there we go.
So I was going to say that there weren't people like that, but there you go. And as far as I don't have any background in any other sort of combat sports or even any other type of judging. I've judged at robo games once, and I was sort of foisted in this position and had to interpret the rules and do the best I could. But I can see that you would want to try and create parallels between this and, say, boxing or MMA judging or what have you. But the reality is that this is not two humans fighting. This is the machines, and the machines can be so vastly different that, I don't think it can be blanketed like, this is what I gather, in boxing you kind of count the number of hits somebody gets on somebody as adds towards a points total. And it just doesn't really translate to two completely different radio-controlled machines battling.
Understandable.
I don't think I can see where Kenny's coming from when he talks about that, but in the case of the Ice Wave fight, if that fight had gone to Ice Wave, basically it would say that if your weapon your robot loses its weapon, you will never win.
Oh.
Unless you can disable the other robot. Like if the fight ends with one robot with a broken weapon, working drivetrain, the other robot with a working weapon, working drivetrain, then if they want that to be the automatic win for the robot that still has functional capacity of both those things, then they would have to have written the rule book that way. But there's enough sort of space for the judges to make some subjective calls in there that isn't how it happens. It isn't an automatic win for the robot that still has a working weapon and drivetrain. And I don't believe that the damage to Scorpius wasn't that substantial. It blew off a couple armor pieces. The way that its weapon was broken was not. It was a unlucky hit. I don't know if you saw what actually stopped their weapon from working, but they had these little tabs that stuck out that they stuck their weapon safety rod through, and those just got bent in so that the weapon arm couldn't articulate. So it was a unlucky bit of damage, but was not like the arm was torn off. That was, in my mind, had Ice Wave, I gave all the damage points to Ice Wave, but at the same time, had he really done some real damage, then, some of the other points can start going the other way. And in that match, it was just, it was, aside from Scorpius losing some armor, it was just so incredibly one-sided. So that was how I went. And, now that I remember, it was a split decision. Naomi went the other way, but,
Hey, you're only
2
one
out
of three.
Yeah, exactly. 2 out of 3 make the decision, and that's why there's 3 of us.
Last couple of questions I got for you. First one being, do you have like a go-to deciding factor, like I don't know, driving ability out there, using the environment to their advantage? Like, is there anything where if you're torn that you say, well, how'd they do in this category, like for yourself?
That's a good question. Like if it's a match where there's like no visible damage.
Well, not even that.
Or
just pretty much in your mind. So it goes the distance, it goes to the judges, and you're looking at the two bots, and it seems pretty even. Like, do you have a go-to one where, like, well, he lost his weapon, but he used the environment way better than the other guy did, or he landed more shots, or like, is there anything that you've used as like your tiebreaker for yourself?
So I don't know if I consciously have tiebreakers, but something that is hard to avoid not using is the performance in the last half of the match.
Yeah.
When you're watching it live, we've got this 3 minutes to watch it, and that's kind of all we have. And then we have, the amount of time that we have to make the decision is 40 seconds. There's not a lot of time for a ton of reflection. And so strong showings at the end of the match are really powerful, as much as I want to try to read the entire match as a story where you count it all. The reality is at the end of the match is really what sticks, because the judges are sitting there and are like, okay, now I need to decide, and it was really close, and really what happened at the end. Where was it trending, I guess.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
Good way to look at it. If it had gone another 2 minutes.
Yeah.
So there's one of the interesting things that's happening in the background, and will be picking up steam, I think, as once the season wraps, is there's actually a venue for discussion amongst the people who are judging this year about how could we improve either the format of the show, or ways to clarify the judging rules to help us make better decisions and come up with stronger ways to defend those decisions. Okay. So we're not just sitting here being like, nope, that's how we do it. So everyone, Naomi, I think Lisa Winter, who is going to be on the show a little later this season, she's the one who came up with this original idea, and we're sort of like going from there to expand that and come up with like what are the ways that we can make this better. And I have some ideas, and Lisa and Naomi have some ideas too. So hopefully that will help, and help us do our jobs better. And I think that in some ways you will never expect too much transparency out of a television show as to their judging methods. The reality TV shows I normally watch are completely subjective judging. So what we're doing is a mixture of objective and subjective. So it's an interesting combination.
I like it. I think it's a winning one for sure. And of course, every great idea is going to be met with a little bit of skepticism, to say the very least, and criticism at that. But last question for you, most important one: is there a dream matchup that you would like to see that you haven't yet? And as a follow up to that, do you get upset when it doesn't go to the judge's decision?
I'll answer the follow up now. No, I love a knockout. Honestly, those are the best. It's a relief every time it happens. Judging's fun, but it's better to not have to do it.
Yeah.
And dream matchups. Let me think. I don't want to spoil or anything, since obviously I know how the season turns out. Let me think here. I think Bronco versus a multi-bot is an obvious one.
Yeah.
That would be really fun to watch. Bronco's always fun to watch. So
yes.
Anything where you can put them in a situation where they can use their weapon in some sort of like insane, overblown mode, like throwing 120-pound robots around would be great to see.
Is Bronco's?
It would actually be a pretty good fight too, because they're not super high on armor either. So if it was, something like what is the twin horizontal disc spinners, Gemini versus Bronco. I think that might be interesting. Obviously, Bronco would be the favorite in that match, but it could be spectacular and a cool fight.
Is Bronco's popularity just because of how he flips people? Because I was watching it with a buddy, and he's like, all he does is flip the other bot, and I was like, yeah, but he does it really well.
Yeah, pretty much. I think it's just there's other pneumatic flippers in the Battlebots world, but none work as well. And I've heard of people talking about how in the UK that's a much more common sort of robot paradigm, but it's just Battlebots is very careful about not having too many of the same type of robot. Although one would argue there's a lot of vertical spinning robots.
Yep, there
this
is.
season. But yeah, a low-powered vertical flipper or lifting robot is, not that exciting. But one that can actually get some real air is it's spectacular, and it's really super fun to watch those matches, because there's a lot of, the other thing too is it's a lot of anticipation too. There's that, is he going to make it? Is it going to happen? Whereas, a spinning robot is like, okay, we know what's about to happen here. But the high power flippers are, I think they're really cool.
All right, well, he is Derek Young, the judge and the original bad boy of BattleBots. And Derek, I can't thank you enough for taking some time to be on the show. This has certainly been a great and informative segment, so I'm going to enjoy the rest of the season. I hope you do as well, but try not to spoil it for everybody, because we all know that you guys already know who the winner is, but it's still going to be just as exciting the rest of the season. So thank you again so much.
All right, thanks, man.
You have a good night.
Bye.
All right, once again, that was Derek Young, the bad boy of BattleBots, stopping by. I almost said dropping in, stopping by to talk some BattleBots. Of course, we resume BattleBots. It is the second half of the season this Friday night, 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific. Please set your DVRs, your watches, your phones, your whatever you need to set. Just make sure that you do not miss it. Speaking of things not to miss, Ms. and Mrs. is a hit. Second new episode was last night. Haven't caught it yet, but the first one sold me. I was like, this is going to be amazing. I don't know what it is about WWE reality series, because I'm kind of over Total Bellas, right? Like, I think that much into that many different characters' personal lives kind of ruins their character in the ring. Like, there's no longer kayfabe, right? But to see how two people that came together in that world of wrestling, Miz and Maurice, and their different backgrounds and how they're making it work and how they've taken on the world and now parenting, it's incredible. I love it. It's the best part about either Total Divas or about Total Bellas is Brie and Daniel Bryan. Plain and simple. I would love to see those worlds collide, right? Because I think that they're actually like really good friends in real life. I don't know, because I know that Maurice's problem with the Bellas is actually Nikki, not Brie. But I don't know if it's like super personal between Daniel Bryan and The Miz like it was The Rock and Cena. But that would be my pick. I think that would be a great crossover to do every once in a while. But Miz and Mrs., go and check it out. BattleBots Friday. We got Brian Klum coming up tomorrow, possibly another guest. We will see. But that is going to do it for this Wednesday edition of the Fan Show. Hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget, give us a like on Facebook. We are so close to 1,000, and there will be a merch gift basket giveaway, pretty much, as I think the best term for it. Follow us on Twitter, all of the Infinity Gauntlet accounts that are active right now anyway, with the exception, of course, of the late edition of the Outdoors division. But there is pop culture, music, wrestling, and robotics on there. Go and give them a follow. Make sure that you're keeping up with all things Fan Show as we continue to move onward and upward. So subscribe, like, love, and share. Give us a review on iTunes, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Spreaker, and Spotify. So until next time, ladies and gentlemen, best of luck to you and yours. Go Niners, and remember, of course, it's all fun and games until you butt fumble. Good night, folks.
Do you remember the time that Mark Sanchez ran into his player's butt? That was funny sports.
Thank you for having me on the show, man. I love the Fan Show.